Hello. This is a less formal type of review. I'm working on writing the script for a video about the film Onibaba, which the Black Phone incidentally seems to borrow from here and there. But until then, I figured a less formal video was in order for this movie here. I did not like the Black Phone. In fact, I kind of hated it, and I'm kind of confused by a lot of the positive reaction to it because I feel like it has some pretty glaring errors, some pretty glaring gaps in logic. The premise is solid enough. A kid is kidnapped and kept in a basement where there's a phone. The phone is disconnected, and yet he receives phone calls from the kidnappers' previous victims. It's a solid concept, but I think the film just I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking. This is from a short story by Joe Hill, who is the son of Stephen King. And the story goes that Joe Hill, he just came upon his literary success all on his own. He took the pen name Joe Hill because he didn't want to he didn't want the shadow of his father to hold sway over him, to how people reacted to his stories. And to that I say, if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. I do not believe that Joe Hill's parentage was unknown to his literary benefactors, and even if that was the case, even if that story is true, the cat is long since out of the bag. Everybody knows that Joe Hill is Stephen King's son by this point, and the similarities are pretty apparent. You have the abusive father, the abusive alcoholic father. You have the overly violent school bullies. You have the little references here and there. You've got the kidnapper who's holding a bushel of black balloons, kind of a reference to Pennywise holding red balloons. You've got the kid in the yellow raincoat, which is also another sort of reference to it. It's my understanding that the movie took a lot of liberties from the original short story, but still, Joe Hill is listed as the executive producer here, and I'm just kind of sick of these over the top tropes. The abusive alcoholic father who is played in this film by the guy who did the guy who played Balder in one of the God of War video games, and I just find this man's acting style just kind of hammy and unbelievable. So it already kind of like took me out of the movie in that respect. And also, again, just the trope of the overly violent bullies, where you're just literally like beating the shit out of each other. There's a scene where the little girl runs in with a rock and just smashes a kid in the head with a rock, and then they flip the girl over his shoulder, and then they're kicking the girl, and it's just, that's not how bullying is. That's not how most incidents of bullying. I don't think they get to that sort of level, that sort of heightened ultra violent level. There's another scene where the one kid like does karate on this other bully. He does like kung fu karate and beats the shit out of the kid. And so I'm already in a place where like I don't really buy much of what's happening. My head is already kind of in middle of the road, kind of artificial movie land, which doesn't really give a good foundation for suspense or believable terror, so that I'm not there. I'm not there. But my main problem with this movie is just glaring lapses in logic, in believability. One thing that I don't like is kind of the style of movie criticism that just kind of is kind of nitpicky and kind of like backseat writer director. I remember watching somebody do a review of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which is a bad movie. It's a very, very bad movie. But the reasons that this guy was listing was like, why didn't Doctor Strange do this magic spell? Why didn't he do this magic spell? Doctor Strange is a bad movie for many other reasons. What spell or whatever he's doing in any instance is not the reason. But in the Black Phone, I think there's just some very obvious questions that any audience member would have that just are not answered. I think what good suspense does is it sort of answers the viewer's questions. It answers their most obvious questions. You know, they might try the lock on the door, they might try the window that's locked, they might try this and that. And once we see those avenues are dead ends, then we can kind of get to the suspense in the intrigue of how does a person escape from such a trap. But in the case of the Black Phone, right off the bat, the kidnapper, who's played by Ethan Hawke is fine in it, but he's sort of underused, I feel like. Ethan Hawke brings the kid food. He brings him a plate of whatever, scrambled eggs and some water in a glass bottle. So immediately my brain goes, hey, that's a glass bottle. Why doesn't the kid break it? Stab the guy. Never does that. Okay. He gets the first phone call. The kid on the other end, he says, I tried to dig a tunnel. You should go dig a tunnel under the floor. The kid starts digging the tunnel, but then at some point he just stops. There's no real explanation. He just kind of stops. I guess you could say that the digging was too much work. He wasn't making enough progress. There's sort of a throwaway line before of like, will I have enough time to dig my way out? But it just sort of, the kid stops digging and just sort of when the next ghost calls to give him the next escape attempt, he just sort of forgets the digging, moves on to the next thing. There should have just been, a real quick 30-second scene where the kid's digging and he hits like a concrete foundation or something. He hits a concrete foundation. He can't dig anymore. That's why he needs to move on to the next plan. Okay, the next plan he gets from the ghost. He says there's a wire loose in the floor or whatever. The kid uses the wire to tie on to a metal grate that's over the window. He ties the wire around the metal grate, tries to climb up and then undo the latch on the other side of the grate, undo the window latch. In doing that, he pulls the grate down, falls on the ground, hits his head, but he never goes back to that window. The window, it seems like he's succeeded in overcoming the most difficult part of that escape, right? He pulled down the metal grate. Now there's just the glass window. Unless his plan was just to sort of open the window to scream. But it raises the question, okay, could he not have climbed up this window? It doesn't seem too high up. There are a bunch of carpets on the ground, lazily answered by a sort of a throwaway line of the ghost says, did you try stacking the carpets under the window? The kid says, I've tried everything. But that's a scene I think you really need to see. You really needed to see the kid trying to escape out this, what appears to be a very obvious escape route. There's the toilet seat cover. There is the dirt that he could climb out of the hole to sort of pile underneath the window. I think you could stack the carpets. It looks very obviously like you could stack those carpets, like you could stack something under that window and get out. A throwaway line of dialogue does not satisfy that curiosity. So he seems to be just kind of half-assing all these different escape routes. Like he'll try one escape route and then just kind of give up for no reason. There's no real satisfying logical reason for him to give up one escape route and then move on to the next. They try to sort of satisfy all these failed escape attempts by sort of bringing them all together at the end to make like a trap that the kid came up with on his own. The theme being like, you gotta fight for yourself, boy. You gotta stick up for yourself. So he makes this trap that's like he's gonna trip the bad guy with a wire. He's gonna fall in a hole, and then he breaks his ankle on the grate that was dislodged from the window. The trap itself is like sort of bizarrely redundant. Why would you trip the guy with the wire but then have him fall in the pit? It just seems like a kind of hackneyed way to try and tie all this stuff together. It just doesn't seem to it doesn't seem to gel. It doesn't work for me. There's all these subplots that go absolutely nowhere. The sister of the kid is psychic, and I'm not sure if she's supposed to be sort of the conduit, the sort of psychic conduit for this like telephone, or they both just have sort of independently kind of different psychic powers. But there's a subplot with the kid's sister, and she's having these premonitions in her dreams, and it doesn't go anywhere. The only place that it leads is she leads the cops to the killer's house, but it's the house across the street from where the kid is actually being kept. It's the house where he's like burying the bodies. So she really like accomplishes nothing as far as helping to free her brother. It's really just kind of goes nowhere. You got another subplot where the brother of the killer is staying in the same house, and the cops knock on the door and they find the brother, and he's been like trying to piece together the case for himself. He's been doing cocaine and trying to solve the case. Little does he know that his brother is the kidnapper right there in his own house. And it seems it kind of strains credibility at a certain point, because the killer, Ethan Hawke, is like sitting in the kitchen with his shirt off, wearing a mask. And you're telling me that the brother just like never noticed that? You're telling me that the brother never went in the basement at any point in time? There's all these just sort of leaps in logic that like on their own might not have seemed like much, but when you've got so many questions like this that go unanswered, when you're sort of thinking ahead of the film to this extent, it's really just sort of glaring and takes you out of the movie. The final phone call that the kid receives, the ghost tells him to fill the phone receiver full of dirt, and it's like, I get it. You're trying to have some sort of aesthetic, thematic congruity here. He's beating him with the phone because that's integral to the plot. Blah blah blah. Whatever. That is surely not the deadliest object in the room. Again, there was the glass pop bottles. There's the heavy toilet tank that he could have hit the guy on the head. He digs through the wall to get into a freezer on the other side, and the metal panel on the freezer has these sharp corners. He could have also stacked the meat from the freezer, stacked the concrete up under that window, made a nice little pile there, climbed up out the window. Again, I don't watch movies this way. I don't watch movies to sort of nitpick the little mechanics and the little minutia. But when you have a suspense film that's essentially set in one room, your world is very limited. And how believable that scenario might be is very much dependent on the sort of little mechanics of that very small, isolated world. So if there's all these questions that are constantly popping, I don't know. It sucks. It sucks. The only real shock or scares in the film come from these jump scares, which I'm not opposed to jump scares on principle, but when it's just sort of a lazy quick cut of the camera and a loud noise and there's nothing else going on in the film, it just seems sort of cheap and corny, and it was more annoying than it was anything. But yeah, I really did not like this movie. I don't really understand all the positive reaction. If I've missed something in the plot, if I've missed some other little piece of exposition that maybe pokes some holes in my argument, please let me know. But in any case, I did not like The Black Phone. I thought it was awful. Okay, goodbye.